Is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by my co-host Ian Rivers. And Ian, we got a dress situation here. We got a
Yes,
fashion
sir.
emergency. We're both well, they're not quite the same. I will give you that.
We have different
We're
we have different variations of it. I've got the script, and you've got the standard. The standard home jersey. So, or I guess it's away in hockey, right? They wear the whites at home, I believe.
Yes, yeah. So for those who aren't or only listening on the audio and not watching on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, where we do video versions of the podcast, we're both wearing BSU hockey sweaters right now.
Yes, we
So
are. Had to get in the hockey spirit. Obviously, we'll be talking a little bit later to a friend of ours, Lucas. So, if you're listening to this one, stay tuned because we'll have more content for you coming up, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in the show. But had to spoil that less than a minute in to this
yeah,
episode. But this will
Ian's
be a
just
little
so
bit more of our
excited he couldn't
structured
contain it.
episode. And yes, absolutely.
So we're getting ready here for Beaver Banter and getting this podcast going here. And let's start off, Ian, by talking a little bit about some volleyball. It was never an easy weekend in the NSIC. It is one of the premier volleyball conferences. How did the old volleyball team do this weekend?
Well, the Beaver volleyball team had a tough weekend, man. They really did. They're on a 4-game losing streak now. Of course, they had to go into Wayne, Nebraska, and take on the number 1 team in the country, and that's never easy. Taking on Wayne State, they did lose 3-0, but I think they had some decent sets. I think the first one was a little bit ugly, and they kind of grew into the game, but it still wasn't enough to ever steal a set. And then in Sioux Falls against Augustana, falling 1-3. Again, that's a little bit of a tough weekend. So they're down to 6-10 overall, and I believe that puts them at 3-5 in the conference. So still sitting a little bit below middle of the pack in the NSIC overall. But all things considered, you know, still not a terrible season thus far for the Beavers, and they've got a decent chance to get back on track on Thursday. That would be tomorrow night if you are listening to this. Or I'm sorry, this will probably be coming out on Thursday morning, I would assume. Or if you're listening to it Thursday morning. So Minnesota Crookston, Thursday at 6 p.m. They only have 3 wins total on the season. That's a good chance to get back on track. And then unfortunately, you come back home, you've got number 8 in the country, St. Cloud State University. So it'll be an up and down weekend, I presume, but let's hope for a split, and let's hope to get back in the win column for the Beavers this weekend.
Yeah, it's like all right, this is like the one of the more like scheduled wins of the season here. You get all week to get ready for Crookston. All right, awesome. Who we play? Oh, number 8, St. Cloud State. Like that's you gotta take on those top teams to prove you're with the top teams. And we've kind of talked about this all season long, Ian, with the volleyball team. Is like there's kind of 3 different tiers in most sports in the NSIC. There's your juggernauts, there's your like middle of the pack teams, and there's kind of your teams on the bottom end of the conference. And for Bemidji State, it was, can you like establish yourself firmly as that middle of the pack team, kind of realistically to where the goals were for this team coming off of a 4-win season or whatever it was a year ago. So, kind of where do you think that they've done in terms of establishing themselves in that aspect?
I think they've done a good job establishing themselves as kind of a middle of the pack program, at least this year in the NSIC. They've kind of taken care of business. I think outside of that Sioux Falls game, most of the teams that are below them in the standings, they have been able to beat thus far. Augustana kind of tied with them in the standings, so we'll let that one pass as well. And they will have a couple more opportunities coming down the stretch here at the end of the season. But I think it really does. It starts here this weekend, and an opportunity to get another win, keep the momentum rolling that you had earlier this season, regain some of that. And I think they have a decent shot to do that against Crookston, a team that Bemidji State has a fair amount of success against. And I think, no offense to Crookston, but quite a few teams in the NSIC have a fair amount of success against.
Yeah, exactly. And just getting, it's part of that turning the corner. You kind of have to take those subtle steps, and they've been doing that for the most part, and they've put themselves in a position at least to get into that middle pack portion. All right, Ian, let's move into a little bit of women's soccer here. And again, we talked about some tough tasks for women's soccer and how this weekend would go, and a little bit of a tough matchup. And well, they had a bit of a defensive slog kind of in one of those games, right?
Yeah, they played pretty well against MSU Moorhead. I got a really good chance to watch that game. I sat down and watched it from start to finish, and I think that it was pretty unlucky for the Beavs that they only won 1-0 in that game. Honestly, they had a lot more opportunities in the first half. The Moorhead goalie really stood on her head at a couple times off of some corner kicks and some other good opportunities. Made some great saves. I was really encouraged by the play I saw going forward from Bemidji State in that game. Like I talked about with that Sioux Falls game, and even a game a little bit earlier in the season that I got to watch against, I believe it was Upper Iowa, where they did win 3-0, but it was like they just didn't look like they really had a plan or any plan to go forward once they got the goal. And it just so happened like, hey, the ball's rolling that way. Let's go give it a shot. But in this game, they looked like they had some purpose going forward. And I really liked that performance. It was a 1-0 victory, so they took 3 points. That's what's important from that game, I think. And then Northern State, a team that they were neck and neck with at the top of the NSIC standings. I didn't get a shot to watch that one. I was at work on Sunday until 3 o'clock. And so, of course, right as the game is ending, I'm getting off work. And they drew 1-1. And is it a little bit disappointing? Sure, you're at home. You have a chance to really take control of one team's destiny, I guess. You have a chance to leapfrog them. There's kind of a four-way tie at the top of the NSIC right now, or a four-way battle between the top four programs in St. Cloud State, Minnesota State, Northern State, and Bemidji State. So that would have been a good opportunity to kind of jump those programs and get yourself in good standing. But there's still going to be opportunities. Bemidji State still, I think, sits in the best position of all of those four with that game in hand. We talked about that little bye week or half bye week. Bemidji State is the only team of the four of those who have played that bye week game so far. So there will be opportunities to make up those points coming down the line towards the end of the season here. But at the end of the day, not a bad result. There was a goal scored in this game by Lauren Hodney for BSU. That was a long shot. That was really impressive.
It was incredible
from her. First goal of the season for her. So congratulations for your first goal of the season, Lauren. And man, that was
what a way to get it.
Right. I mean, you that's what stinks is you would hope that that'd be like the game winner. That's what you want to tell everybody is like, yeah, look at my game winner from this last weekend. But unfortunate that they couldn't hold on. But Northern State's a good team. They've kind of come up, maybe not out of nowhere. I should check the standings last year and just see where they were. They're not a team that necessarily. Okay, so they finished 5th last year in the NSIC with 26 points. So they were up there. I guess I just never thought of them. Yeah, I mean, last year you kind of knew what the teams were. It was Minnesota State, Bemidji State, Augustana, and Minot State. And, of course, a couple of those teams having a little bit of a down year this year, especially in Minot State, who sits right now at 14th in the conference with only 4 points on the season. So a difficult weekend for the Beavers. I'm sorry, one of the games, obviously against a difficult opponent. And then this next coming weekend, you have another chance to get some points. You have UMary and Minot State. You'll be in North Dakota all weekend. I am so sorry for you. Friday night or Friday afternoon, we'll be in Bismarck. They're playing UMary at 3 p.m. And then at noon on Sunday, they play Minot State. So a couple of chances. UMary and Minot State currently sitting at the bottom of the table. UMary with 5 points right ahead of Minot State with 4 in 13th and 14th in the conference. So honestly, both games are on the road, and I think it's a pretty balanced NSIC this year. You look around, and you see a lot of games being dropped by Minnesota State even. They've got 3 draws on the season. Northern State's got 3 draws. St. Cloud State, the only team with 6 wins in the conference, has a loss and a draw as well, being to Bemidji State, that loss. So really, I mean, it's a little bit more balanced than we've seen even from these bottom teams. I'm looking for 6 points, though. I'm looking for these girls to come out here and cement their place kind of at the top of the standings. You look at the back half, there is 7 more games left this regular season for the Beavers. These games might be your easiest. I mean, it's hard to get any worse than that. We've already played Crookston down at the bottom of the standings. Other games we have left: Minnesota, Duluth, Augustana, Concordia, St. Paul, Wayne State. Wayne State's in 5th place. All those other teams are kind of hovering around the middle of the pack. And then you've got a couple of tough games. Minnesota State right there at the end of the schedule. So pick up 6 points right here. Put the pressure on the teams that are right above you to keep performing, to keep getting those wins themselves, because right now we're kind of just hanging in line with them. I'd love an opportunity to grab 6 points this weekend and really make a push for the top of the NSIC.
Right, exactly. That is in play for them to do, and it's kind of served up for them. I mean, like you said, nobody really wants to go to North Dakota and spend their weekend doing that, but you got to go to Bismarck and you got to go to Minot to try and establish, as we have, the Beaver Battle, and try and win that. Because do we count that first game as the actual Beaver Battle since it's non-conference, Ian, or do we say that any time that these two teams meet is considered a Beaver Battle?
I think it's kind of any time that these teams meet. I think we should do a conglomerate score and keep it and revisit it at the end of the year. And I think we'll find that Bemidji State would probably come out on top, but we'll figure what that is. I think we are 2-0 right now because I believe Bemidji State volleyball beat Minot State, and then of course we're 1-0 in soccer as well. So try to go 3-0 in the Minot State season. I don't think football gets a chance this year to play the Minot State Beavers, but basketball will take their shots, softball and baseball as well in the spring. And I'm not sure how you count any golf or anything against Minot State, but
if they
sure
are better than their
beat
golfers generally, then we count it. If not, then we just if it doesn't fit my narrative,
no,
then
it's not a yeah. It's only counts if it fits what we believe. So
exactly.
But yeah, a good opportunity, the Beaver Battle. I think 6 points from this weekend is what you're really looking for. Like I said, pull away from that middle of the pack, because right now, even if it finished today, Bemidji State's still got a home playoff game before the semifinals of the NSIC tournament. So that's, I think, the lowest you're going to want to finish is 4th place in the regular season standing. So at the very least, kind of pull away from those teams that are in the middle of the pack right now and stay pat with those top 4 teams and better solidify yourself as a contender coming down towards the end of the season.
Right. It's sitting there right for you. And Ian, you've probably already mentioned this a little bit. I know we've talked about this in past podcasts, but what does that outlook look like for the Beavers for the rest of the season? Are they in that position? I mean, I know if the season ended today, like you said, they would get that home playoff game, but I mean, it's already October 11th. We're starting to kind of get towards the home stretch here.
Yeah, there's 7 games left, and Bemidji State has not clinched anything yet. Technically, if weird things happened, they could get passed by Minnesota Crookston in the standings. So still, climbing towards clinching that playoff spot. But like I said, I think they're in the best spot going forward because they have 17 points. They have a game in hand against every team above them in the standings. They've only played 7 games. Everybody else has played 8 so far. So they're at 17. Northern and Minnesota State are at 18, and St. Cloud State is at 19 points. So a win in that spare game puts Bemidji State at 20 and in first place in the NSIC standings. Of course, if Bemidji State wins out, they control their own destiny and they win the NSIC regular season title. But that game in hand kind of just comes, it's handy when you're looking at trying to get extra points down towards the end of the season. And let me try to figure out goal differential quick. I can't see it. You would think that they would put on the main standings page, like the number 2 tiebreaker that they use to determine. It's weird to me that they don't. So actually, Bemidji State has the tiebreaker over St. Cloud State, should they be in a 2-way tie with them because they beat them. With Northern State, it would come down to goal differential. With Minnesota State, we don't know because we haven't played them yet to see what would happen. The first time is head-to-head, and then it's goal differential after that. So, I've done a lot of talking. Let me try to look into some of that goal differential to see if I can figure out where the Beavers might stand if a tie comes into effect.
Yeah, because this has been this is all what it builds to. Like the Bemidji State has done enough regular season accolades to where it's like, okay, put themselves in this position. We know that they're a good team. We know that they're going to be knocking on the door come NSIC tournament time, come the end of the regular season when it comes to tabulating this, and even NCAA tournament appearances. Like that's just become the standard. And it's not just getting in anymore. It's like we've talked about before, getting yourselves that home playoff game, getting to host that kind of area of the bracket and have it all run through Bemidji is highly ideal. And, just putting themselves in that position, obviously every team makes their goals. The first goal is to be at the top or towards the top of your conference. And that's what Bemidji State is trying to do right now, is to try and do that and get in a position to be towards the top of the NSIC in women's soccer again in a year, like you said, Ian, where things are a little more even. There's not quite a juggernaut top team, but still, I mean, this is maybe as good a chance as them to sweep. They've won the regular season they've won the regular season outright a couple different times. They've won the NSIC tournament last season for the first time in program history. Why not sweep both?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a really, really cool feat, because I don't think, obviously, they've never done both in the same season if last year was their first time winning the tournament. So obviously you want to focus on the weekend in front of you, and I think that the Beavers are doing a good job of keeping it one game at a time. They don't let bad results, like you could easily let that game against Southwest get in your head and have that kind of loom over you going forward. But literally the next day they go out and beat a Winona State team, and then the next game they come out and beat Moorhead State. So I think they do a good job of that. In terms of goal differential, they don't have the exact goal differential posted, but they have a stat here called margin, which I believe is probably margin of victory. It looks like about that. But
I would guess
first in the NSIC with a 1.46 goals per game average margin of victory. So, and the next closest would be Minnesota State at 1.3. And then you're looking at third place in that category being 0.67. So a pretty big disparity between the top three, or between the second and third teams there. So going forward, honestly, let's look for a couple more of those big wins. Keep that goal differential as high as you possibly can, because remember, the NSIC tournament, the semifinals are hosted, and the championship game is hosted by whoever was the top seed. If you remember last season, the Beavers won that tournament in Mankato. Minot State actually knocked off Mankato, so it was a Beaver battle in Mankato. So even if you lose, in the second round, in the semifinals, whatever the highest seed is, that's what gets to host come the semifinals. So I think, obviously get it done whatever way you can. If you win 1-0 victories this weekend, I'm not going to complain. That's 6 points. But, going to be nice. Get a couple 3-0s on the schedule there. Keep improving that margin because that would be pretty neat coming down towards the end of the season, especially because I feel like every time we play Mankato in the regular season lately, it's been a draw, and we just can't find a winner, and neither can they. So it's probably going to come down to that, but we'll see.
We'll see. All right, let's move things along here. We get into the realm of football, as the Bemidji State Beavers had a bye week the week before, Ian, coming off of, again, that loss to Mankato on homecoming. Now they try and get back in the win column, except now they got to go down to Wayne, Nebraska, take on Wayne State. And look, as we've talked about before, Wayne State is never an easy out. And going down to Wayne, Nebraska to play that game, especially driving all the way from Bemidji, that's not an easy task. Wayne is not an easy place to play. And we're going to see what they can do this weekend.
Yeah, especially, and I guess we'll touch on this a little bit if we end up going around the NSIC, just to take a look at what did happen. But Wayne State had a pretty good victory this last weekend. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough game, and I'm looking at Bemidji State to come out, and you don't know what to expect because you don't know how much rust there might be. There's always the question of rust or rest. Which would you rather have? And right now, I mean, Wayne State just had a dogfight against Minnesota Duluth, and Bemidji State's coming off a bye week, so maybe they can use that to their advantage, get out to a hot start, and keep the lead the whole game. But obviously, like you said, it's on the road. It's one of the furthest road trips you probably have to take. I'm not sure how far it is from Bemidji to Bismarck compared to, I would assume Nebraska is probably further away.
I think it is further, yeah,
than Bismarck, North Dakota, but either way, I mean, that's one of the longest, if not the longest road trip you're going to have to take this year, pending any playoff matchups that you might have down in Texas again or something like that. But either way, it's a tough road trip and it's a tough team. I mean, they've kind of announced themselves, like you talked about the middle tier, teams. Wayne State was kind of a team when we came around. Weren't really relevant at all, and they kind of have slowly been creeping up the totem pole over the last couple of years. And last year made a playoff berth, and now again they're kind of primed to do the same thing. They're sitting at 4-1 in the conference, 5-1 overall. They're one of 5 teams at the top of the conference that are really pulling away from the rest of the pack. I think there's 5 teams this year. I would say there's 6. I'm going to include Moorhead in there, and we'll talk a little bit about Moorhead in a second because they almost pulled off a stunner this weekend. But there's really 5 teams at the top of the conference, including Bemidji State, that could win this conference. I think any week is a week that Minnesota State could lose. Any week is a week that Augustana could lose. It's really tough. And this is going to be a big game for Bemidji State. It's a quality opponent. You need those quality wins because, like we saw last year, Bemidji State just didn't have a lot of them, and they still got a home game in the playoffs without any serious quality wins. I mean, Duluth was like 7-4 at the end of the year, but I think in terms of Division II college football, quality win is a team that is really seriously in playoff contention come the end of the year, which I think actually Duluth probably was. They were one of the first teams out, I believe, but either way, it wasn't what you want. And this is a serious chance to get one of those games, get your confidence back underneath you. I don't know if their confidence was shaken at all. I'm not inside the locker room. It probably wasn't. They seemed like a level-headed team against Mankato with the loss there, but either way, it's going to be a big game, and I'm super excited for it. A week off of Bemidji State football is never what you ask for, but I'm happy to be back, and I'm going to be happy to watch this game.
Yeah, especially because we've never had to deal with them ever having a bye week because normally it's just through the whole thing. And again, because of Upper Iowa leaving the conference, they get dropped from the schedule. Some schools were able to pick up games. I know Bolte was actively trying to pick up another game on the season. I mean, he was out on social media saying as much back in the spring of like, hey, just other coaches, we like, we'll play somebody. We want another game on our schedule. And it just never was able to materialize. So they ended up getting a bye week. And, whether, like you talked about, does getting the rest actually help, or does getting the rest actually help, or does it kind of get you off your game? I think after a loss like that to Mankato, I think there's 2 trains of thought, right? There's the whole like, well, now they got 2 weeks to set on it, and how's that going to help them? And is it better for them to have another game to be able to have a turnaround so you can forget about it? To which I actually feel like, and this is a gut level feeling, so maybe if there's any football coaches or football players listening to this, you're like, that guy's an idiot. First of all, I agree with you. Second of all, I think weirdly enough, I think after a loss like that against Mankato, I think 2 weeks for them to just breathe, because that could be sometimes you turn around and then the next week you're like overcompensating and be like, we gotta go out and we gotta get that win. We gotta bounce back. I think that extra week just lets everybody take a breath and kind of get over it and move on. And then you can spend 2 weeks focusing on Wayne. And that's the other thing that helps Bemidji State. Yeah, the road advantage doesn't help, but you do get 2 weeks to game plan for a team. You get 2 whole weeks to prepare for what they want to do. So Bemidji State theoretically should come out sharp and should at least feel prepared for their game plan and what they have to do on each side of the ball, and just feel a little bit more rested, because after those games against a team like Mankato, it's a dogfight and you're going to get bruised up a little bit more than normal. Get a couple weeks to rest up and hit the ground running for this last part of the season. But Ian, since they ended up losing that game against Mankato, what's an area of this team that you're like, okay, here's, obviously we're assuming that they're going to win, but like, here's what group I want to see play better and kind of reestablish themselves, or some facet reestablish themselves in this game against Wayne. What exactly are you looking for out of Bemidji State?
Well, I think like we talked about last week, there wasn't one particular area of the game that I thought Bemidji State really got dominated in. Obviously, you look at the rushing stats, and they had a couple of those big ones that got broken off. But other than that, they were pretty good run defending against such a good running team in Minnesota State, Mankato. And I think that that's going to be the main thing that I take away from this game. Wayne State right now, you look at their rushing stats, they're not a team that runs the ball particularly a lot. They're kind of middle of the pack in terms of actually kind of on the lower end of the spectrum come rush attempts so far this season. and they average 160 yards on the ground a game. They're middle of the pack, 6th overall in the NSIC. So I'm looking for Bemidji State's run defense to really establish themselves, make Wayne State beat you in one way. And this is kind of going to be a bit of a tune-up game. We've kind of been hinting at it all year. Moorhead might be a little scary this year. Bemidji State, 12th overall in overall pass defense in the NSIC this year. And MSU Moorhead, first overall with 381 pass yards per game. So that's going to be a test. This will be a little bit of a kind of a warm-up game because Wayne State sitting at 4th overall in the conference. This is the best team Bemidji State's had to play in terms of overall passing prowess besides Northern State, I guess, who's only 3 yards a game behind them. But that was week 1. So this will kind of be a little warm-up game for that. And I'm looking for the run defense to really – like I said, just make them come out, and they're going to have to beat you through the air. If they're going to beat you, it's not going to be on the ground. And I'm looking for this offense to really get back out and have another game where it just looks like it's working the whole time. I know it's hard. Don't ever have 2 drives that end where you're like, man, that was kind of ugly. You know what I mean? If you have an ugly drive, come back out the next time and respond. Go make the extra pass, dive a little bit further to make that catch, whatever you got to do. That's my one thing for the offense. And obviously it's not always that simple, right? You can't just, I'm just going to go out and do better this drive. They're probably trying 100% every drive they go out there, but I would assume, maybe they're not, but yeah, I think that's what I'm looking for. Just get back, get your feet underneath you, play a solid game. Don't turn the ball over. Just typical football talk. Do the right things, play fundamentally sound football, and I think that you are a better team than this Wayne State team. Go out there and reinstill the confidence that you are going to get to the playoff and you are going to have another home game at the Chet.
Thanks, Coach. That really motivated me there. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
Team, man.
Blood thinks he's on the team. That's
Coach
the thing
is right.
about...
It's on us. That's me. That's me in the locker room right now. That would be me. I'd walk into the locker room thinking that everybody knows who I am from the Beaver Banter podcast, and I'd start giving this rousing speech at halftime. Who is this guy, man? What is he doing
here? Who exactly? I have a podcast. Trust me.
They all stand up and start clapping for me. Like, oh my gosh.
I didn't know. Do you have many leather-bound books, and does your apartment smell of rich mahogany?
I wish, man. I wish.
Don't we all? So I'm looking for offensive, like you talked about. I'm looking for a little bit more consistency. And again, like trying to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because they did it against Mankato, and Mankato is one of the best defenses in the country. So it's not to say like this offense is like lost or they can't, whatever. Like just get some of that consistency back. Doesn't necessarily mean they need to score a touchdown on every single drive. But like you said, Ian, if you have a 3 and out, get maybe a first down or 2 on the next drive. And if you got a punt, it's whatever, but don't like stall out on 2 straight drives. And we've seen that, how that kind of bit them against Mankato. Obviously the turnovers are a thing that's happened, but we kind of said they happened equally. So it's kind of like it washed itself out in the end. But I would say just a little bit more consistency out of that offense. I think the defense should be able to do its thing for the most part. But again, it's just this team is good. This team's got to do the things that they need to do to win, and getting that consistency back on offense. Again, getting a little bit, having a bounce back game for Muhammad would help a little bit as well. Booker had a nice little game last week, but again, with the 2-headed running back system, it's kind of when one guy's having a good game, you just kind of riding that player in the second half more than player A. But still, a little bit of consistency out of that offense would go a long way as well. Wide receivers, just avoiding the dropsies a little bit that happened in that homecoming game. It's minor things. Again, all of this might sound a little nitpicky, and it is, and we've talked about it on the podcast before. We're not nitpicking because we want to rag on guys. It's because we think that this team's got some high aspirations, and this team can do some really good things. So we're trying to say, okay, not just would a team that wins more games than they lose, because the Beavers already are like, they're already above that level, but a team that's going to get into the NCAA tournament and make a run. What are they going to look like? What do they do? And those are some of the things.
Yeah, I think like the baseline coming into this season, for what you would hope Bemidji State can do is just get back to the playoffs. Obviously you want them to keep improving. My goal was like, hey, can you get the 3 seed? Can you just keep moving up that ladder a little bit? Keep building the program forward. Can you go from the 4 to the 3? And then, now you don't have to play the best team in our region when you win your first playoff game. You can play a team that was maybe had a loss like you did or something like that. And so that's kind of what I was looking for. But, like I said, I think the bare minimum for this team, and I think, again, I'm not in the locker room, but I think if you ask most of these players and coaches, that's probably where they put their baseline too. They want to get back there, and they want to be able to compete for an NSIC championship. And I think both of those things are still alive. Mankato's going to have tough games coming down the stretch. So is Augustana, including Bemidji State for Augustana. And I think there are so many good things to take out of that Minnesota State game. And I think that's, if you can play with them, you can play with anybody in this conference. And I think we have a decent chance, even on the road, to beat a team like Wayne State. So I'm going to go ahead and predict a victory for Bemidji State. I think it'll be close, but I think it'll be kind of a decent, solid victory for Bemidji State. I don't think it'll ever be super in doubt. I'm going to go a little bit higher scoring. Both of these are good offenses, so I'll go 31-25. Some weird point thing is going to happen with a missed extra point or something for Wayne State. I can just feel it.
No scoreagami for you in this matchup?
No scoreagami. It'll be 70-20. Yeah, you know what? 70-20.
Just because you said that, I think it's going to be 69-19.
Okay, but a little bit more defensive minded from you. I see how it is.
All right. Yeah, it's a nice day to be a Beaver fan. But so I think ultimately the game ends somewhere like we'll go 42-24. That'll be my final score. Beavs win, right. Of course. Is there any bold prediction you have in this game, that like anything that you think? My bold prediction, I do think we see a bounce back game from Muhammad. I think he's got 70 plus rushing yards and double touchdowns. I think he's got 2 touchdowns, all purpose, we'll say.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this has happened, and I think this is my bold prediction this week. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think Bemidji State is going to get their first defensive or special teams touchdown this week. One or the other. I don't know which it'll be. I just have a gut feeling that one of those two things is going to happen this week, and it's going to help. Maybe it comes at a big part of the game. The offense stalls out. It's a tie game, fourth quarter. Wayne State throws a pick 6. Maybe they make a good defensive stop and they get a punt return touchdown, because there were some really good returns in that game against Mankato, man. There was some really good returns, and they just were a half step away from breaking it. And so I think either one of those two things could very well happen. I think that's my bold prediction.
All right. Now I got to think and see if they actually did score a defensive or special teams touchdown. I don't think they did, but there's going to be one guy on the football team who's listening to this podcast, if they are, that actually did score the touchdown, and be like, I'm right here.
These guys aren't even paying attention.
Of course I know him. He's me. Like, that's going to be him listening to this. So we're sorry if that is you listening. But I think it's as good a time as any to try and do that on the road. To be a good spot to do it. Don't forget, Wayne State was the spot where perhaps the greatest Bemidji State punt return in history ever happened. That was Gunner's. I think it was punt return. It was Gunnar Olszewski. Remember, he returned it like 20 yards upfield, and then he was about to get tackled, and he pitched it behind him, and the guy took it into the end zone. I can't remember the other guy's name, but
Mikey Junker.
That's right. It was Junker.
Mikey Junker.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, you're making me feel like I'm a junior in high school or in college again. Jeez.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I remember hearing about the play. Everyone's like, did you guys see that play? And like of course, like the Bemidji State social media teams put it out there. I was like, oh my goodness. Like it's ballsy. That's one way to put it. And that's for those of you who ever watched Gunner play special teams for the Beavers, that was definitely his mantra. Remember, we talked about in our podcast a couple weeks ago with Jordan Hine, and we talked about the baseball guys in the press box. Those same baseball guys, because Gunner also played baseball for a little bit, would say like, Gunner's philosophy is no fair catches at all.
Can't do it, man. Can't do it.
That
Maybe
theory didn't.
maybe he should think about that, a little bit harder. I don't know if he still
Yeah,
goes by that, but Connor, you might want to.
I doubt he does in the NFL.
Yeah, probably not. Especially
some
because like he came in playing for Belichick. It's probably like, maybe I don't want to play it that fast and loose with this
I
guy.
think Belichick liked. I honestly think the plays like that, making that weird little pitch play, is some coaches will see it like, well, that guy's never going to play for me because I don't want him ever doing that in my life. Some coaches
Right.
are like, all right, this guy's got it. This guy thinks he's
Yeah.
him. You know.
Yeah.
So Ian, let's go around the NSIC quick. Let's take a look at some things, and we'll kind of tease a little bit about what we got coming up later this week, and then we'll call our pod.
Yeah, let's just wrap it up with the around the NSIC. There were some pretty interesting storylines. Sioux Falls marches into St. Paul, beating Concordia St. Paul 35-28. A good win for Sioux Falls to kind of get back in the win category. Wayne State versus Minnesota Duluth, finally a matchup that doesn't involve Bemidji State, between one of those top teams in the top 5 in the NSIC, and Wayne State comes away with this one 28-18 in Wayne, Nebraska. Minnesota Duluth was looking pretty scary there for a while, and I can't tell if I'm relieved that they lost and they look human, or if I'm a little bit scared that Wayne State was able to beat them.
Especially because that was in Wayne.
Yeah, we'll find out this weekend, I guess, which we should be happier about. Augustana in Sioux Falls, 38-6 over Southwest Minnesota State. They have kind of, taken over as one of those taken over Wayne State's position as kind of one of those bottom teams in the NSIC this year. Minnesota State, 24-21 over MSU Moorhead. Moorhead almost pulled off the upset. I think they missed a field goal at the end of the game that would have tied it, is what I think I saw, because I follow this guy that follows Division II football on X, and he, I think, tweeted something about that or posted something about that, and Mankato was able to run out the clock. So no Cinderella upset there for Moorhead. That's a scary team that we'll have coming up here in a couple of weeks, almost upsetting the Mavericks in Mankato. So in Bismarck, Winona State 17, UMary 7, and then Northern State, probably their best win of the season so far. Maybe not because of the team you beat, but by how you did it. At home, a 46-9 win over Minot State. So Northern State, it's been a down year for them. They're only 2-4, and their 2 wins have come against teams that have not won this season. So they're definitely not having the best season in Aberdeen right now, especially compared to what we've seen lately from them. But yeah, like I said, there's kind of 3 echelons right now in the NSIC. It's the top of the conference: Mankato, Augustana, Duluth, Wayne State, and Bemidji State. All of those teams are either undefeated or have only 1 loss. Then you look at the middle of the conference, it's kind of teams like Winona, Sioux Falls, Moorhead. I would put Moorhead at the top of that. I think if Moorhead played any of those teams, they would beat them easily. All of their losses, I think, have come to those top teams. They're 3-3, 2-3 in the conference. And I think most of their losses have come to teams like that. Let's see. 1 loss against Minnesota State. They beat Northern State. They lost to Augustana by 4. So, yeah, another close game against a top team in the conference. They beat McKendree in one of their non-conference games. They beat the hell out of Minot State. And then their first game of the season was – where are they? Oh, they lost to Wayne State by 8. So, yeah, all 3 of their losses have come against that top team in the conference, one of those top teams. So, yeah, and then, of course, you got the usual suspects down at the bottom. Minot State, UMary, both 0-6 on the season. Concordia St. Paul and Southwest Minnesota State, 1-4 in the conference. So, and then there's Northern State, just kind of right above them. But, again, they've only beaten the 2 0-6 teams, so I'm not going to give them credit and call them in tier 2. I'm gonna just put them in limbo in between 2 and 3.
They're the best of the worst, Well, and it's crazy how like you look at a schedule and you're like, okay, well, like this team, they should beat this team. They'll probably lose to this team. This team will be a good game. And how like you get halfway through the season, you're like, okay, well, Moorhead, I guess, is going to be a game. Wayne is going to be a game. Well, that win against Northern isn't that impressive after all. And like all of these different things.
People do crazy. This all the time in the NFL too, man. Like the schedule comes out in June or May, and everybody's freaking out. Charger fans do this too. Like they're looking at the schedule last year, 2 years ago, they're looking at the schedule. It's like, oh my God, look at this. In December, we play like the Rams and the Colts, and this Denver is going to be great. And then all three of those teams end up being terrible, and it's not a good schedule. It happens every year in the NFL, and a little bit here. Like you said, there's been some surprises. Moorhead looks a little bit better than we thought they would. Sioux Falls looks a lot worse than I thought they would. Northern State looks a lot worse than we thought they would. So things are going to change. You can't really tell until the teams actually strap on the pads and play some football. But
so all right, well, we're gonna call it a pod. We're gonna get ready in a little bit. We are going to talk with Lucas of Beaver Territory. He's gonna join us to do a ton of hockey coverage, and we're gonna spend a whole podcast devoted to men's and women's hockey. It's the icebreaker. We got the hockey sweaters on. We're ready to talk about some things. So get ready in the next 24 hours after you listen to this podcast. Be on the lookout. If it's not out already, we're going to have a podcast with Lucas. It's going to be ready to go. We're going to talk to him. It's going to be great. He's always great to have on the pod. And we're going to get into that hockey coverage next. Yeah. Ian, anything?
You need to listen to it. You need to listen to it because there will be a quiz on it. And again, you need to share the link. If you don't have at least 3 people that have subscribed because of the link that you shared, you will be getting booted and you will be failing the quiz. So let's just make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. Let's just go ahead and subscribe. Let's listen to the podcast. Let's get people to listen to the podcast. You're our little minions out there. Go ahead and spread the word, spread the good cheer of Bemidji State sports, and spread the good cheer of the Beaver Banter.
With that, we'll catch you guys next time.